Ann Miller.
Present.
Ben Mahan.
Present.
Josh Farren.
Present.
We have 5 council people here.
Thank you very much. Okay, tonight's workshop, I know we're going to be here to discuss our future plans, the monies we have, what we need to do with our certain facilities, the City Hall, Chrysler Building, Mulberry Street, the Water Department there, and maybe the garage as well, Street Department, that would be included, or Police Department there, Chrysler Building, yeah, which includes our clerk's office, building inspector, ordinance, code enforcement, thank you, and I think that's it.
I'd like to, if I may, start off by asking a question. What is the total dollar amount we're working with? Do we have that figure?
We don't have the total dollar figure at this point. What we have, what we're going to share with you tonight is we are looking at property from 4 Bare Feet, and it's going to run around $5,000 to $6,000 a month.
Okay,
to
so let
lease.
me clarify. What I'm asking is, do we have a bond project or a certain dollar amount that we're allocating for all of these projects? If so, I'd like to know what the dollar amount is, and I'd like to see what projects we have listed.
I think that in the mayor's absence, until the council tells us what you want to do, we can't get figures, because we don't know what you want to do, so we can't go out and get proposals from engineers and architects, and that will set, then we can come back to you with numbers once we know what you want to do.
So we have no dollar amount that we're targeting?
I believe as the council moves forward with this, Jeff Peters, our financial advisor, will share with you that we will probably seek lease rental bonds so that we can put the funding out longer and the payments won't be as high. And then I believe there's a $2 to $3 million limit on that. And that would be for renovate City Hall and the police station to get everybody back where they're supposed to be.
Okay, again, it's just my feeling, my opinion, that we need to prioritize the list that we're going for, and we'll work on the one we feel is most important, I think.
I think that's exactly what the city administration needs to hear. What is that priority list?
Right.
So do we make the priority list now, or I thought there was already one here?
No, there's not one.
I think the items still just discussed, if our clerk could make a note of those items, so we'll have reference again.
I'm taking notes. I have a piece of paper. I can't do 2 things.
And do we still have, last administration, I think even yours, we had blueprints of some, signs that we had looked at. Do we still have, I know.
There was a proposal put together by BLZ that was circulated, I believe, in late 18 or 19, and I believe that there are some copies still available. I don't know how many. We can get more.
Because
That only dealt with, well, it did deal with the Chrysler Building, Public Safety Building, and City Hall. It did not have anything to do with it, did not address the police department issue, per se. I think, well, maybe it did.
I thought the mayor, because he was gonna try to get us a copy of those, for this, and.
He did not request it from me, or otherwise I would.
No, that's fine, I didn't know if we had that to look at, or to.
This is, I believe, the document you're referencing, the BLZ put together.
So that's probably got the one where they even included, the old reporters building as well, then, correct?
You don't believe so, I can only address this building and the public safety building. I could be wrong, probably am, but I don't believe it's talking about.
The DLC report talks about leveling the building where the clerk's office is now and building a new department. It does not include or does not consider the purchase of the former reporter building.
Okay.
And those hard construction costs from a couple of years ago were from $3.7 million to $4.2 million.
And again, I think some of the projects were renovation and decision on the Rogers Building.
What building?
The Rogers Building, south of town. Street Department on Blue Bluff, clerk's office, city hall. Did I mention police? Police department. That's 5 items, those are the ones
Water building,
and possibly the water on it, depending on what we decide and how we decide to go with the clerk's office. One time we talked about a new building that would house both the water department and the clerk's office. So that's 6 items I can think of. I think we have to be realistic and decide what's the most important. I think the council should be on top of this and know what's happening since we signed the,
What was the dollar amount of the bond?
that's what I'm trying to find out.
I know that there was like a certain threshold where we had to split. We couldn't use the one bond.
It'll be in 2 projects, is what they said. We'd start them one at a time, not both at the same time.
Did he, Mr. Peters, did he reference the?
You recall,
I didn't hear the question.
Mr. Peters had given us the amount back when we discussed about this being 2 projects instead of one project, starting at different times.
Ben, do you have that information with you?
Yeah, so when we met and Mr. Peters talked about doing everything as one project, your threshold for doing something like that is $7 million. So you have to finish south of $7 million to do one project. And I did email Rebecca just now the latest feasibility study from DLZ that was done back in November of 2019. And basically what they did is they looked at Chrysler Building, City Hall, also doing the police station. They did not look at Rogers Building, or redoing the water office. And we have since, we've gotten preliminary numbers on redoing the water office, combining our office with their office there. That would come in right at $750,000. Those are rough numbers.
Ben, is City Hall including the police department?
When DLZ did their feasibility study, they actually had several different options. So they had an option where they did a small addition to City Hall, and then they did an option where they actually did the police department on the back side of City Hall.
I mean, renovated it?
Renovated, adding the police department on here, and then they also did a freestanding like behind.
Oh, okay.
And I can send that to everybody.
I'm in the process of sending that study to them right now.
All right, okay. Just keep in mind that, that this feasibility study was done in 2019. So construction costs since then are up 20.5% in the past 2 years.
Ben, you just said something about Mr. Peters saying 1, but at our meeting, he said do that in 2, so you're not starting them both at the same time, because that was our concern about if we started City Hall. Well, that was our question, is if we started City Hall, why would the clerk's office, police department have to move out if we're starting at City Hall first? And
Right.
then moving to that.
Yeah, his recommendation is definitely to do 2 projects. Now, you can't do 2 projects simultaneously. You do have 3 bonds that are rolling off in January of 23.
But I thought he recommended that we don't do them simultaneously, as I recall, because that was the question was presented to him, and then how do we house everybody if we're doing it at the same time? And he said, do it one at a time. And
Yeah, if you're not going to temporarily move anything, then yeah, you would have to do them in stages. So you're going to have to decide whether like our office, are going to move us twice, once to temporary location and then to the permanent location. If you're not, then we're going to think through which one are we going to do first. You're going to have the chicken or the egg first. So it's that whole situation topic. But you do have 3 bonds rolling off January 23. That equals $4.29 million in monies. Then you also have that lease that he talked about. You would have to stay under $7 million. So you do have some options there. It's just how the council wants to tackle all these.
Would it make sense if we're doing City Hall, which is obviously Police Department 2, that you'd also have to do Clerk's Office, because the Chrysler Building is, if we're gonna move the police station there, so
Well-
those 2 would be going on simultaneously. The Chrysler Building and City Hall Police Department all working and going at the same time.
No, well, okay, here just from several administrations past, when we back with Rogers plant. Here was the reason behind, pushing the homes back here and the Rogers lot line. It was to renovate City Hall. We moved the clerk's office over there, it was supposed to be a temporary thing, get City Hall redone. As you know, money's and finance come along, we haven't got it done. We're still sitting over there. The idea was to renovate City Hall, get the clerk's office, everybody back over here to City Hall. Originally, they were going to, they shored up the walls, put a new roof on Chrysler. That has since, no longer has there been upkeep and things on that. It was originally to convert that into the police station. Now I think we've discussed this before. I think probably the common agreement is that building needs to be tore down and a new police station put up there. Because our thoughts is to get police department away from City Hall. If you got major things going on, whatever, it'd be a big public case going on, that court service doesn't need to be here at City Hall. That should be over at the police department. And that way they were looking at designing buildings where had their interview rooms and everything they needed over there. Then you have your emergency personnel all, you have the fire and police over there together. Obviously, City Hall's remodeled, you got your clerk back over here, and we need to look at, because we hadn't had a code enforcement officer, now we have one. A building inspector, we always had one, but they're housed upstairs. Get those all back. The block plant was purchased during that administration, during that council. At that time, the council wanted to, because of, we were under IDEM, that put us under, what I want to say, notice about our sewers up there. It was, we bought the block plant to put the street department and the water department down there. Two separate entrances, not just one building, we all come in, still keeping those departments separate down in that facility down there. Then taking the street department and turning that over, as you know, our fire department, they have their fire training quarters up there. Turning half that into the training grounds for the fire department and putting a real range up for the police department. Just what they've got, it was something that they could use and also rent out to other agencies and make some money off of there. And then that would free up our Mulberry, at that time, we decided that Mulberry Street, we could, if that was any of the real estate we wanted to get rid of, Mulberry Street, we could get rid of it because we would not need it at that point. That was the original plan.
So according to that plan, City Hall would be first as priority.
Yes. I think it has to, because we've got to deal with the clerk and the others that they were moved over there for that purpose. Get this renovated so we can get them back in here. Since then, we built a fire station, so it's freed up all this bay area, it's freed up all this area. I know we did a little remodeling up here, we added some offices and things up there, but obviously there's a number of things that we do. Because I know there's concern about separate entrances to City Hall and the court, because they talked about an entryway outside over here from City Court coming up, keeping it separate from the mayor's office and clerk's office, a variety of things. But I think your number one thing we have to focus on is City Hall, so we can get the clerk's office and the other offices back over here. The police department, since that time, we now have computers in the cars, do a lot of reports in their cars. The sheriff's department has told me that they utilize their interview rooms, if they need other offices, if they would need those during the time. But I think if, once we got started on that, housing them in a temporary trailer or whatever, keep things going, I think they'd be more than happy to work out of that, knowing they're getting a new police station that's going to be just temporary. Again, the sheriff's department had said that we could use their facilities as well for interview rooms and things. They can work out the cars as well with computers. This squadron down here is not, it's not much of a squadron to begin with. It's long after that many years ago. But that's just my opinion. I think City Hall first, then you concentrate on the Chrysler building, get that knocked down, get the new police station up there. And third, I think I still think the block point, that's why we bought it, was to get those facilities down there. There's a lot of paved space down there at the street department where you can put your outside shelters, just like they've built those to put their trucks under the shelters, put the sand and things and salt underneath shelters. I don't know what it looks like since there's some remodeling going on, I know Ben, your company's been in there, and I think, RMC's been in there, I don't know if anyone else has been in a while, so I'm not sure what it looks like at this point. But we know there's gonna be obviously cost in remodeling it, because it's gotta fit our needs. But I'm open for discussions. The water department, we had never did, that is recently, we talked about maybe getting a mall inside here. I know Mac, I think, was, talking to me one time, he was worried about the drive up, we've already got a drive up over there for them. So I don't know if you would want to tear that building down and bring them into City Hall, and put a drive up window over there on the other side where the bay of the fire department was, or just leave that building as is, utilize the rest after you do your addition here, the add-on, whatever, and utilize the rest for parking. That's just some options. Obviously, it's, again, like it was back then when we did it, it's the council's decision, so, everybody's got a voice in it.
Just an observation, I think it's probably right that this has to come first. The biggest consideration, as I've looked at square footage and space, and they consider to bring in the parks department and everything else over, this building is not that big, it's 11,000 square feet. The city clerk's office has sizable storage requirements and permanent storage requirements, so we may have to reconsider what we do with that. They work out of it, I think, on a pretty daily basis, so it's got to be convenient and handy, but at the same time, it takes up a lot of square footage that's in this building right now. As I envision relaying out the building to make these things happen, that's going to be the biggest problem. There's room for people, but there's room for all this very.
So you're indicating that the clerk's office could not be housed at this venue, right? Because of them needing to get in and out, flexibility with the records.
Yeah, they could be physically housed here, and what do we do with paper? Do we push it all, and make it convenient in that regard, and have all the distance space? And it costs a couple $100 square foot, $100 a square foot for everything you do with build. And so we're trying to do enough of the storage space that's pretty expensive.
What's the plan for the record keeping, the clerk's office moving forward? You know, a digital system, or what's the? We don't want to move you in here and it's not going to work 10 years down the road. What's the?
So right now, we utilize 3,000 square feet. 1,500 square feet of that is storage. So just to give perspective. And the state announced last year they extended? Last year, they extended our records retention schedule. Right now, we're on a 7-year plan. Well, we were on a 7-year plan. Going forward, we're now on a 10-year plan. So our need for storage space is actually going to increase. And we can digitize it, but we still have to follow the 10-year schedule. So if we digitize records, it doesn't necessarily mean that we can destroy those records. We still have to keep those. Even though we have a digital copy, we still have to keep those for 10 years. Our software company currently does not have a way to digitally produce all the documentation. So like the claims, things like that, those are all paper hard copies. So even if we were to scan all those, we still need the storage in the square foot. So unfortunately, because of that decision, our need for storage is going to increase instead of decrease. Not a decision we made, not a decision we're necessarily happy about, but that is the new retention schedule that they've created.
You have to be housed in the same area as the documents. I mean, are you accessing 7-year-old documents?
We access them pretty much on a daily basis. Anytime there's a public access or records request, anything like that, they're all in that area. So
Just last week, I had to pull documents from 2003.
Which I think if we do also, if we're adding on, build your basement. I mean, I know that's what the courthouse has operated for years, the records are down in the basement below them. That's something. I don't know, we just have a partial downstairs, but
the actual paper going forward should be more digitized in the future.
At some point, yeah. We've been working with Keystone for, I've been here 2.5 years, so we've been working with them for a while now on when they're going to make that happen. Because they're talking about taking their software from a server-based to a cloud-based system. Be the first step in going that direction. 2 years ago, they told us it'd be done in a year. Then last year, they told us it'd be done in another year. Right now, they're not giving any type of timeline when that's going to happen, so they're already behind on that. So, yes, in theory, reality is I don't know when that's going to happen. The cloud-based software should have already happened based upon their own timeline. Yeah, and at some point, we will probably have more room than we need for storage. Right now, we have the need for more room because we have to store more stuff. Kind of a tough situation. And there's some records, just because we have them now, we have to keep them forever. I don't know what that's gonna look like down the road. At some point, they have to allow us to destroy those, but as of right now, we have books we have our first ordinance book and hard copy. If anybody wants to see it, just make sure you wear gloves so you don't tear it up. So, things like that we have to keep for historic preservation.
I apologize for being late. I hate to be the guy who's late and ask questions to tell me what's happening, but right when I was sitting down, you said you have total X square footage and 1,500 is devoted to.
Right now, we are utilizing 3,000 square feet total. 1,500 of that is storage. When we store for the utility office, the building inspector's office, and ourselves.
And you were referring to somebody being behind schedule with digitizing in cloud. Explain that.
Yeah, so right now, or previously, we were on a 7-year destruction state. The state
Board of Council direct that?
Correct.
Okay.
Last year, they came through with a directive extending that from 7 years to 10 years, which is going to increase our need for square footage. We've also been working with our accounting software, which is Keystone. The goal was for them to switch to a cloud-based system.
That's what you were talking about.
Yeah, and that was supposed to be the first step on eventually having a digital type of storage. But they're already behind on their timeline they promised us in that side. I don't know when that's going to happen. And then also with the state extending from 7 to 10, it's a little backwards than what.
What would prevent us from, regardless, I have no idea, so you probably very well correct me, but what would prevent us from scanning in electronically the 9 or 10-year-old documents you have right now?
You can, since you have them in hard copy, you still have to keep them on a 10-year road.
Oh, regardless? Oh, okay. Is that something that has to be stored on site?
You scan them electronically and store the other copies off-site, so that way you're not.
In theory, you probably could.
I didn't hear the question.
The question is, if we scan them in, if we had a company come in and scan all the documents, we would just keep the digital copy on site, and then we could have the actual physical storage off-site.
Okay.
Yeah, theoretically, yes. I don't know how much it's gonna cost you if you
Sure.
digitize all those.
And how much is it, and obviously, it's our, an estimate of 1 year's worth of records, is that 10 boxes, 1 box, 5 boxes, varies?
30 boxes a year.
30 boxes?
Probably about 30.
The banker's box.
That's for our office, that, we're not, how many would you guesstimate for the utility?
Probably about the same amount.
Susie, doesn't the school district use a company that stores our records when we put them back in stores like that? Isn't there a company they use, I can't think of the name of it,
Yeah.
but they actually store our records
We did.
off-site.
Yeah. Find out.
If they're digital, I guess my question is, do we wanna go through, I don't know what the expense of digitizing all that is.
That much would be pretty significant, I think.
I would think so, because you're not, the difficulty they're gonna have with ours is a lot of our documents aren't letter size. So like your claim documentations, it's a special form size that you have to purchase through the state or accounts rules, they have their own form. and it's folded over and stapled with the claim and documents. So it's gonna be a pretty labor-intensive digitizing system. I'm not saying it can't be done, I have no idea what it would cost.
Since you say you have to keep both copies, and I would think it would be silly to go ahead and get all the old, I'd start now, and then those others, box up, get them in storage, and as that 10-year mark comes up, dispose of them, and then create us some more space, but, when the clerk's office is downstairs in Mac's office, I know, up here in the courtroom, we didn't utilize upstairs because those boxes, records were stored, all upstairs, and I know those storage units there were full.
The court records were stored upstairs, and they've since been moved to repurposed space behind the court office. So that's different than what he's talking about. Those records are still in this building.
No, I'm just saying that's how they utilize the clerk's office. I mean, you had both locations, so I know it does take some space. That's why I say, when we're gonna add on, I would think a basement, and that way you have your storage room just like the annex, like they have over there. Down the basement, they got those storage rooms.
I was just requesting not a freight elevator, some type of elevator system, we could get those boxes down and up, just for my back's sake.
You know, many companies that do this.
Yeah, I really don't know, so. Yeah, I'm sure we can get.
What is,
Yeah,
it's $100,000 to scan it. It's less than what? We've moving you guys around a couple different times.
We got a quote at our office once, and I would bet there's probably 150 bankers' boxes of documents in the basement. And I don't remember the quote exactly, but I mean, I think it was chasing 6 figures, or 75,000 anyway. And so I decided to sit there another 50 years and let the next guy deal with it. But obviously we got different requirements here, but I mean, I think that many, if you're saying 30 boxes for each, I imagine it would be pretty expensive now. Of course, it lets you search by keyword, and there might be some advantages that if you finally got done, you can access them and maybe do things quicker, but that's a big one.
yeah, personally, I'd be shocked if it's not 6 figures.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
I may be way off.
You also have in that room back there, you also have documents from like the flood that we cannot get rid of for reasons, and there's probably, I can tell you, probably 50 or 60 boxes with documents just for that project, not counting the other projects that have been done from year to year on, different road projects, water projects. I mean, you're not just talking our boxes, which are huge amount. You're talking storage back there that's delicate and you've got to have.
Yeah, anything FEMA related, I don't think we can,
Yes,
I think we can ever get rid of,
no.
or they'd have to give us a timeline. Not saying I understand it, but. Any questions for me?
Just a thought, 5 o'clock, we waste a lot of time at a workshop and still not accomplish anything. I would suggest we recognize our priority, and then, as Becky has alluded to, this would have been, it will take some time then getting costs together as to what the total amount of that package would be. And if we determine, and I'm going to suggest City Hall first, then we determine what we want included in the City Hall renovation, whether it is the clerk's office, whatever it might be. And then we start getting plans, formulating some prices, to go from there. Just a thought.
Would that look like people working in City Hall now, moving out somewhere temporarily, refurbishing City Hall, and they move back in? Does the clerk's office move back in, or? I guess this is all what we're trying to decide.
That's what we would have to determine.
And would we then be making use of these garage bays over here, because there's not enough space otherwise, right?
Right, that's what I said, we got a lot of dead space that could be utilized. I think that's something we have to work with our contractor to find out what they're, because obviously they're gonna do what we want. I mean, they want that, if we want this still working while they're doing certain sections or whatever, you know. Somebody discuss.
And whether we need to add an addition to the present building.
Sounds like there's a question as to whether or not the clerk's office can fit in here. But what about the water department? I mean, I know you mentioned Phil Jr. about the water department going to the block plant, the Rogers building. Or did we talk about it also being in one of the bays and having a drop-off box?
That would be the water office.
The water
The
office.
water department, Mulberry Street would go down to, the block plant.
The water department would go to the block plant?
This is the utility office over there.
It's utility, water utility.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
okay.
So we could, I mean, you know, if that's a concern, we could leave that building alone and just do our addition here at City Hall, or whether it's a freestanding addition on, I don't know what would be best. One of the plans originally, like I said, was an extension because it was an outside entryway just for the courtroom separately. One of the diagrams back, and that was probably DLZ, I think they did that 1 year. That was after we did our addition on with the elevator that we.
I think that's illustrated in the packet that I just sent to you.
Okay.
Which was-
But you know, we've got this whole half block here to utilize.
Then do we have to build a parking garage to accommodate?
We've got a parking lot right over there.
Well, and I mean, City Hall, I mean, as far as going first, that's good for me, but I also want to make sure we prioritize the police department. I mean, we're not going to re-put it back here,
No,
right?
That's
Is
where
what it
Chrysler
is?
Square is.
Yeah.
That's the fire station.
That would be a top priority. Maybe, to me, it'd be just a matter of which makes more sense as we're moving people and having a continuity operations. The police department would be the top priority of just needing to be done, in my opinion.
That would be second, in my opinion, because we purchased that and moved the clerk's office over there to get this done. Because if you start the police station, now you've got to find that housing for the clerk's office, all the offices that are over there, plus the police department, and try to house them and the records and everything. You know, so you're gonna be making that move somewhere else and then move them back. Or if you get this done, then you can move them in here and it's done.
I mean, that's what, as far as just what order of operations makes the most sense, I mean, that would seem to make sense.
This building is gonna be difficult to do. It's a two-story building, we have to accommodate all ADA standards. If you go in the basement, look at our electrical system, you know that you're gonna start from scratch there. So this probably is a $4 million number in here, because we have our own building. If you look at these corners, the walls are pulling away to the outside, with the structure work to do this, things that have to happen. The least expensive thing you can do is build a building beside, build a water office down there for the city clerk's office, put a basement in it, put your storage down in that, and you can be done with it. At least you'd be less disruptive. If we go to it, as we're, and no doubt we're gonna remodel this at some point in time, this is gonna be pretty disruptive to what's going on in here. Are you gonna displace the police department while you're doing that? No, I don't think so. They're gonna have to have at least some office space here, even if they work out of the cars, as you suggested. So you need to have, we need to recognize what's happening while this is all going on before we go forward with that.
And I would think that a future police station would have modern and meeting rooms and space and so forth to then take on some of the load here when this was being done, right?
And we've not been hiding in the shadows. We've had a couple of DOT interviews with different, QAW was one of them, Peterson was another, and with proposals for the police department and what we might do. So we've got some numbers to that. We've got some numbers that DLC put together, so we've got some understanding of where we're headed. But it's pretty frightening, it's all $8 because it's expensive to build things today. Police station was $2 million, roughly, wasn't it? Last one we had. There's a couple of BOTs, and the BOT is same as the county is doing right now, is build, operate, and transfer. So you don't have to have money up front, it's really covering construction costs. We've talked internally that we would probably not do that. What the county to turn it over to a team, so there's no bidding process in that. So
Anyone else?
Well, another thought again that we mentioned earlier, the building that we assigned to the detectives' use, that building could be torn down, then we could put up a nice modern building, as Gary mentioned, that would house both the clerk and the water office, with or without a basement.
The scariest thing about when you start touching this building,
Well, I understand that.
you know, you do anything to the outside, the historical society will be all over you.
That has to be compatible.
The ADA that Gary mentioned is a nightmare. To me, right now, for what we're doing, we're fully compliant. People can get around to where they need to get around, to see people. That as we expand, you're gonna have, I guess, what I wanna say is you're gonna have to be very, very careful who you hire, with the understanding that you don't wanna have to completely redo this place. That's where you're gonna run into huge money. If you have to put in another elevator, if you have to do some of those things. I think there's ways of doing this building, maintaining its beauty, restoring it, and not, spending the kitchen sink on this deal. But you're gonna have to be careful, and it's gonna involve people that can interpret laws and architects that are willing to be realistic and not hit those buttons where it triggers certain things.
I think on that DLZ plan, that they discussed that, because that was our issue about upstairs. Like I said, that's what we did back when we did our elevators, we gotta be careful what we added, did to that. So that agreement, we think we need to take care of the city hall first, so we can get clerk's office and everything else over here.
I think looking at having a secondary building, what he said is right. Start getting into this place, it's gonna be a total disaster.
I'd say we do it to a basement, so we give them the storage that they need.
What packet are you referring to?
These drawings that they have, and I think Matt said he
Send you
sent.
a copy, you'll see it.
Yeah.
It's a PDF that was sent you
Okay.
to your city emails.
I think the next thing would be, the second thing, priority would be the police department.
I don't necessarily disagree, but I also feel, I don't want to be late, but not having looked at that packet and not having thought a little bit more about it, a little, just personally, a little prepared to say anything one way or the other.
Well, I think that we also need to look at the condition currently of our public safety building. We had a swimming pool up in the upstairs because the roof was leaking.
Oh, yeah, that building will be removed. When we bought it, it had 7 pools upstairs.
Okay.
And so when we bought it, and then the idea was to put the police department over there. We spent a lot of money after we built that fire station, reinforced those walls and put a new roof on. And the sad part about it is the upkeep was not kept up with it, and it's just continued to deteriorate. So, because that was done for that purpose, to have the police department categories like that fire department for weather-related incidents. But now we know that it's gonna have to be, that's why I say we get you all out of that office and move over here, then that way we can get moving with tearing that down.
Well, that's basically kind of what I'm saying, that some of these decisions need to be made sooner rather than later, before we go into work and the roof is sitting at our desks. Or, some of the conditions right now that, we're currently working and the furnace had to be replaced, but the furnace doesn't take care of, all of our spaces, so we all have to have space heaters in order to stay warm, or we feel like we're working in a morgue. So, I know that everything needs to be prioritized, as you're saying it, and I understand that, but I also think that everybody needs to be aware of some of the current conditions right now, where in our storage room, the ceiling is only partially there, so we have to watch out for water leaks to preserve what we do have in storage. And so I do think that we need to take a look at that and how much longer those offices are gonna have to remain in this building.
Where are you talking about? I'm
The
sorry.
public safety building, the Chrysler building.
Okay, that's what I'm making sure.
And to go on Terry's coattails there, the ventilation in our building is horrendous. When the Sanivac is being warmed up in the wintertime, all of the fumes come into our building. Also, when the police have marijuana plants that they've confiscated, those fumes come into our building. Everybody, every single one of us are currently have our electronics on extension cords because there's not enough electricity in there. We've had a very minor fire over at the Building and Code where May sits. It was just, I believe it was a copier that was plugged in and it caught on fire. They have no true heating and cooling over there. They have a little heater that heats and cools that area. We keep the door open to try to help them get some air. We have ongoing problems with the drains over there. We have to have Hudson come in and they're always having to snake out our drains. So we have a number of problems there that
Why don't,
need to be addressed.
since we all are in agreement that City Hall, the police station, and the public safety building, Chrysler building, clerk's office, are all three priorities, why don't we get what the dollar amounts, the proposals, the estimates, the architects, why don't we get numbers for all three of those areas? And then when we look at the numbers, help us determine, it's hard to determine, priority or what we can do simultaneously or what we can do in what order when we don't know the amount of the cost.
That's actually just two buildings, because your public safety and police department, that's the Chrysler building. Chrysler building,
Yeah, but the police station is down here, right?
the chief's office is, and there's a squad room desk, but there
The
are
deputy
evidence
chief's office.
and things, they're over there, and the detectives are over here, so it's kind of spread out.
How many employees are in where she's talking about every day?
8,
How
9,
many citizens are in and out of there every day?
Yes,
You talking about public safety building or here at City Hall?
Public safety building.
yes, then however many people come in.
Building permits.
Building permits, whatever,
Frequent traffic.
yes.
And going back to Susie's statement about, let's get some numbers together and design, since 2002, the city has paid for 5 studies, and nothing's been done.
Can you distribute copies of those or send
When
me
was
copies
the
of
most,
those?
yeah, when was the most recent study?
That's the one that was emailed to me.
Okay, okay.
I think that has only been one contractor, it was not, it's their opinion.
Okay.
So that was an architectural study. The key to this is, I think, is looking at your building, your use, your holistic picture of what you want to house. It's almost a space utilization study that you need to take, which is basically what the LZ had done, is how to repurpose this building along with just some options of ground. So as you think about, so it's to nail down what you said about cost, somewhat difficult to do that until you have a good picture of what you want to house under one roof, what you want to house within this block, or I guess there's some things to consider in thinking about that cost, that number. There's more like there's a lot of pieces and parts that go into that number.
And the last study was when, somebody just said?
2019.
Yeah, the LZ came into the presentation of the council in 2019,
And that was with the reporter and all that, correct?
do what?
That was with the reporter's office, that study there?
No, that was.
Or is that the one before? Okay.
Has the requirements changed much from the, what was submitted from that to police department, I guess it's 9,000 square feet.
The retention, schedule changed from 7 years to 10 years.
So,
Sitting as an audience member or whatever in the counties, they've been considering some of these things. I think that the reports or the recommendations from BLZ, if not, and I'm not saying we need to spend money on another one, but just that sort of information then led to things that I didn't know about, what problems the county's put so much money into this building over here on Jefferson Street and on and on and on, that off the cuff, it's out of my bailiwick enough, building wise and what party was. I know it bothers me that there's employees and members of the public in a building every day with a swamp upstairs and whatever other problems, because there's safety hazards and other things. But I think somebody, a professional, like somebody from DLZ, prompt more questions or more things to consider, and then, probably put forth a plan or help us construct a plan that makes sense as far as order.
Well, I think the key is the study that you have available to you, that's where you probably need to start. And now, I mean, you've already paid for what the information
Yeah.
you're asking for.
Right, I don't, we need to do that.
Yeah, I mean, and DLC's not the only service available to do that. They had been hired previously from the previous administration, provided a report to the city and.
Well, the wheel's not that much different than 2019, I think, and at least that'd be helpful for me to have a form a better opinion, anyway, or at least have an informed opinion, perhaps.
Again, that's why we wanted to get this place done over here, so we can get them out of that environment, to get that building taken care of.
Yeah.
I would add, some of the items Terry mentioned, while I agree with them, they need to be addressed. A lot of those things can be taken care of out of maintenance line item. There's money available for a lot of that. We can't let that hinder us from moving forward with progress, these new additions we're talking about.
I mean, city budget.
There's a couple things I want to make sure everybody understands. A couple of years ago, we had an wall-to-wall inspection with InSafe. And they went through each building and requested, well, not really requested, gave us conditions on making some temporary fixes at some buildings, with the understanding that they would not be permanent. So the Chrysler building is one of those. We have asbestos in the second floor. We also have asbestos in the first floor. So they required that we fix the first floor with the understanding that building would be down or fixed within a 2-year period of time. So I just want to make sure everybody's understanding that 2 years is now expired. So if InSafe does come back, and they will, and they do a re-inspection, we will have to rectify those problems then. So, rough estimates, our roofs need replaced, gutters are gone. Rough estimate on that's about $125,000. Echo that's falling off, you're looking at another $50,000.
The sprinkler system.
Sprinkler system has expired. We've been told that that is a code violation. The requirement for that is for us to take the sprinkler heads off and replace those. I don't know what the quote on that was. Is that 25? No, don't quote me on that one because I don't remember what that number was. And keep in mind, we've looked at our expenses and what we're spending. We're averaging with utilities and everything else, we're averaging spending in that building about $4,000 a month for 9 people.
Right, which I don't want to dump a bunch of money in those repairs, and I think InSafe will work with us as long as we show that we're moving forward, we take these steps to show, because, where they put us on, of the street department, I think it was probably 7 years before we took care of what needed to be done, yeah.
And they may give us time. I just don't want anybody, if they come in tomorrow and say, you're done, I just don't want anybody saying, wish we would have known. That is a very real possibility. Same thing in Mulberry Street, when they could come in and.
What was the dollar amount for the 400 feet roughly?
So roughly, with utilities included, we're looking about $5,000 a month.
So it's a little bit more than what you're already spending.
Yeah, so on average, it would average about $1,000 a month more than what we're previously spending.
Kind of the same thing, if that's unoccupied, would we have to demolish it to get out of that?
If it's unoccupied, then we don't have to, we don't have to remediate the asbestos and things until we go to knock the building down. And then you have to. I mean, 'cause you don't want that out in the air. So it will require that at that time, but there's no time frame on that at that point.
Isn't that still considered occupied though, with everything we have over there, and the police department's over there, and we've got street department workers going in there, I mean, it'd still be considered occupied, I think.
Well, what we did, and I know Becky was gonna do a presentation tonight, I don't know if that's still on the agenda or not, but, one thing that we looked at Fort Bear View is an area large enough that we could house, court, our office, building inspector, code enforcement, so everyone can move into that. There's also the understanding that if we were remodeling this building, that we'd have room for director of planning, city superintendent, the mayor, and then we could actually do our public meetings there while we were working on this. So that's all inclusive with the $5,000 a month.
The 4 Bear Feet plan, first of all, how many square feet approximately?
It's right at 7,200 square feet.
Does that mean to move everybody and do it all at once? Is that what it is?
You can do it all at once, or you can move just our office. I mean, if you're wanting to free up the public safety building, in my opinion, you want to move our office and building inspector minimally initially. But then you also have the option that if you're remodeling this building and you need to move people temporarily, you would have a place to go.
Well, entirely irrelevant and critical of all these conversations is estimated time in this DLZ report, which I couldn't even have first of estimating. Certainly this building may be longer than anything, even though, it sounds like knock down a public safety building and build a police station, which I can't imagine there's a bigger municipality in the state of Indiana with a smaller police department.
Yeah, the DLZ number on the public safety building, just to give you some reference, to rehab that building was right at $4.25 million. That was in 2019. So you're looking at about $5 million now. Today's construction cost.
11,000 square feet. We live in 1,800 square feet right now.
That was rehabbing the building, so it wouldn't be extending it at all. I don't remember what their number was for rebuilding.
Which I thought we had already decided it's not worth rehabbing.
I totally agree.
Do you remember the demolition cost?
I don't remember those off the top of my head. It's in that booklet. But Gary's right. It was a larger building. What you're looking at is a very large building.
Something else to remember is that the police department does have the evidence room over there. So even if we get the if we get the clerk treasurer's office out of that building, we still have a pretty sizable evidence room over there, and we have at least one employee that works in there on a regular basis, with other employees coming in there nearly every day to process evidence. So that's one part of the equation, but we're gonna have to figure out something to do with all.
Well, that's what I say, even when they moved out, it's still,
There has to be, and we've talked this over a dozen times, there has to be some solution. Police department can't work without an evidence room. We have several thousand pieces of evidence in there right now. They have to go somewhere secured.
What sort of square footage you have now, or what you need, and is there any possibility the sheriff department has?
The sheriff doesn't have extra room.
They're doing renovations over there right now. There's not room for evidence over there. I believe Councilman Decker mentioned about having us go over there and occupy some of their space and have our detectives work over there. That's not really a feasible plan either. They don't have that kind of space over there. So, yeah.
And regardless of what happens, that evidence room has to be in some temporary location until it can be housed permanently again, because we have, items in the state that are permanently in there. That's something I think on our end, we're gonna have to get with the prosecutor to make sure there's a correct way to move it, keep its integrity.
Chain of custody.
All that stuff on the chain of custody, but as it's set, it has to stay somewhere secure.
What's this little building right around the corner?
Detective office.
Is there anybody in there now?
Yes.
That's what it is.
I mean,
We have 2 guys working out of that building right now, but we have had as many as 4 people that have office space over there.
Is there any kind of storage in there? But
In the past,
Files from up here
in
go.
the past, there has been some storage in the basement.
Ambulance used to be over there, then they moved it over to.
Yeah.
Because that basement doesn't stay dry.
What size is it?
It's pretty small, it's probably 500 square feet.
There's a lot of pieces of this puzzle, and you're gonna have to decide how they fit together. You have to have a goal to start with. Is your goal to bring everybody into one building or on one site, build other buildings back here? Or what do you do with that? I guess the timing is, if you're gonna remodel this building to bring the city clerk's office here, it's 2 years away. There's a full 2 years worth of design, implementation, and build out of this building. Well, I've got to pick the fingers and make those kind of things happen. You do something off-site, you have other options. We look at what the city clerk's building is now, Chrysler building, however you choose to refer to it. We've got some labs already done for that. We see what can happen over there. Anytime you're doing something greenfield, it's so much easier. Doing this building is going to be very difficult, and that's why it's very expensive. So if you did something out here, but you're just asking about protecting the building, it's a partial basement under there, it's not the best shape to start with. It's on the plume, by the way, it's not, so that shows us the plume. So, there's a number of reasons to be able to change what we have existing back here as we go forward.
The detective building isn't even structurally sound.
You can refer to this as a campus, or depends on how you build this out, and that's what you have at that point, it's a campus, but all trying to cram into one building.
Can somebody help, I guess, make sure my list is complete as far as at least the majority of the structures that the city owns where employees are, detective office over here, fire department, clerk's office, city hall, water department on Mulberry, the block plan. Is there a building I'm missing or?
The street department. He did the South Mall, he did water department.
North Mulberry.
This one's utilities now,
Oh, I used to,
just to help you out.
There's a site on North.
that's why I'm asking. I'm new.
Station Street Department.
You get a transfer station,
No.
that's across from the street department.
I would include Cunningham.
Yeah, the new testing lab.
Geosanitation.
And you have wastewater treatment also, as a city property.
Yeah, I throw that softball up there. Forgot everything. I like the idea personally of a structure right there, but instead, parking lot that maybe in some ways adjoins this building and keeps some sort of historical integrity that houses the majority of city offices and cohesive aesthetically, and then knock the Chrysler building down and have a nice new police station.
I think you repeat what we said, right? Here, and then the police department.
I think, yeah.
So as you know, we looked at what we can do on this. Anything we do pretty much has to go parallel to Sycamore over here. This alley behind this building has all kinds of utilities buried in overhead, so, and that's how we do this. Because we looked at one configuration of, make an L off the other end of the building down here or something, and first thing you look at is where you get utility problems. So it would have to be something parallel to Sycamore.
So not crossing the north-south alley, is that what you're saying?
You just can't get north-south alley, right, you can't cross.
Did you have a rough cost estimate, like, on what something like that would cost to construct? To the No, just for
To build back there and back, I'm sorry. It depends on how much square foot we're talking about. We're seeing numbers now in that mid to low $200 range. We just took some quotes up here this last week. 225 would be a fair number per square foot.
So you could do something directly behind here with like a catwalk connecting this to this building and using this half and using the detective side for a parking lot later on. You can leave that still standing while you're doing that, so it still houses the detectives there. That's also an option. Because you're going to try to build on that side then, right?
Back to Mike's consideration, you know, if it's freestanding, it doesn't require the same thing that would require us if we were to add on to this, under this building.
faster.
Just have a short sidewalk.
I would like to suggest to our mayor that we have an executive session with the mayor, prioritizing City Hall first, and explore the possibility of another freestanding building that would house the clerk's office and other offices pertaining to their operation, including building inspector and water utility, and another building that would be parallel to City Hall. But I think we need more discussion on those things, see what the mayor has in mind for City Hall, and Gary could add to that, Troy. It seems to me that's our first step. Take all of these buildings to death on what needs to be done. Some of them need to be done right away. If Terry makes a problem staying warm, we can't tolerate that, so someone needs to look into that situation and take care of this.
Well, they put in we had to have a new furnace put in.
Yeah.
It's just the capability of the ductwork and stuff that's
Apparently,
currently there is,
apparently it wasn't done properly then, or it should.
no, it was done properly. It has nothing to do with the workmanship. That was done as far as putting the furnace in. They replaced the one that was just exactly like was already there.
What I'm saying is apparently the furnace wasn't big enough though. Maybe they should have went a little bigger size.
You could be correct, I'm not
Well,
sure about
yeah.
that. I can
You
just
can't
tell
have
you
it.
that the ductwork is part of the problem also.
Right.
It's the way it's, in order to, even if the furnace is the correct size, the ductwork is just so, pardon my phrase, it's just so jacked up.
Yeah, well, may need some new ductwork or modifications.
Right.
I agree.
Right.
But we can't let those things stop us from progressing with these big projects. They're gonna require a bonding approval.
Is there
3 years from now, we'll be sitting here talking about the same thing.
Is there something you'd like done before the next workshop meeting?
I think that's what we want to hear what the mayor would like as well.
We'd like to get more specific, I think, and then get some figures.
Do we have an idea about, what total square footage approximately, either each department, each office, if it was one building, what we would need, and then also, when a business, when a municipality, et cetera, is contemplating something like this, what is typically suggested to be in excess of that needed space, not in a matter of excess in a luxurious way, but for some reasonable room to grow. Do you have any idea on that? Gary, do you?
I would think that's information that we need to share with some company, whoever it is, whether it's, someone else, because they need to know that, what we're wanting, our desires are, before they can come up with those figures.
And it depends on how you choose to operate. This study had 11,000 square feet in there. Mentioned before, we're working at 1,800. Seems like a big stretch, 1,800 to 11,000. We laid out, we had, like I said, 2 different BOTs, and then proposals to it from a significantly smaller building than that. Do you choose to put it over by the fire station? Do they share a training room, or each have a training room? Do they share a workout room, or they each have a workout room? So there's those kind of issues to be resolved as well.
We had a feasibility study in 2019 obviously, the key players have studied it pretty thoroughly, reviewed it, maybe have a wish list, maybe even, you know, have an idea of what options that you want to prioritize. Maybe some of our council members do who have previous experience in various roles. Maybe we should come up with some options and, you know, like not just throwing out, well, why don't we this or why don't we this, but maybe have a game plan, option A, B, C, whatever, and then we look at those options and
We could
choose.
reproduce these for you, those who don't have.
It's sent to electronic.
Now, Jim, or.
Gary, they've been sent, or it was sent to electronic
He,
tonight.
he just sent it electronically to each member.
They have it now.
They have it on the same.
Okay, awesome.
Can the fire department and the police department share a workout room, or are we gonna have to separate?
Historically, that hasn't worked out.
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's not,
We
that's not one
we
option.
may have been locked out of the workout room at one point in the past, so.
Well, those firefighters won't ever do it anyway.
And here he comes now.
Oh, I don't know.
You're on.
Yeah.
What are you?
What am I walking into?
You don't want to know.
Sorry for being late, and I appreciate you understanding my circumstances. Thank you.
Mayor, we were just discussing that, we wanted some input from you as well about City Hall, which you wanted, obviously, your setting that chair now, but, we discussed that obviously we need to get something over here on this side, not necessarily, attached to City Hall, we're trying to extend City Hall, I should say, because we know there's more cost in preserving this whole building on what we went through with the elevator things on, but, what your needs are, what you're thinking as well. You know, we're thinking we need to obviously get something set up so we get the clerk's office and everything out of there and over here like that, and that way we can tear down Chrysler Building with the police station. I know there's a variety of options, I know we get utilities that talked about in the north-south alley. So whether we expand and we put a freestanding behind us, catwalk or something attached, I don't know, or if we go on the other side of the alley and tear down the connectors building, as well as that water utility, or put up a new facility there, or what.
And one of the reasons, you know, I kind of want to get the workshop going, and because you're the ones that are going to make really the decision on which way we go financially on this. And I don't mean to be sarcastic when I say this, but I can operate out of a closet. I mean, I think one of the drawings of DZL that you had showed a large suite over there in the garage area for the mayor and everything. And is that really necessary? Well, what do you, I mean, you sat in this chair a lot longer than I.
Well, we've always said there needs to be a meeting room that would accommodate other people. And that can be done in a number of ways. But I agree with most of your thinking on that. I think what we've decided, we'd like to make City Hall a priority. And so we need to sit down in more of an executive session and decide what we want included in City Hall, this building per se. And then at the same time, discuss the possibility of building a freestanding building that would house both the clerk's operation, the water utility, and inspector, what other offices you think need to be located in this area. But we need to formulate that with, whether it's DLZ or someone similar, so they can come up with figures, because right now we have no idea what our dollars are.
And it's a situation where I really like where my office is at right now, because if somebody comes in, if they're looking for the mayor, you're right there, you're not hid some back room somewhere. And let's face it, if somebody's coming in and they're upset, and they gotta go looking for you, that just makes things worse. So I'd rather stay right where I'm at.
And that could be all part of the renovation.
Yeah.
That's my thing.
Mind if I speak? Just some food for thought. So you keep mentioning City Hall as a priority, and while I don't disagree that that's a priority for you, you're not working here daily. The police have been promised for 20 years for a station. The firemen got it, well deserved, but the police haven't. They're out there working every day and they need a place. We're working under not great conditions. They're not deplorable, but they're not wonderful. So while I think that if you destroy that building and build them a nice facility with their own workout space so they don't argue with the firemen, and their own, I don't know all the terms, squad rooms, that type of thing, all the things they need, that should be a priority. They're out protecting us. Even over the clerk's office, the police should be a priority. They're on the streets, they're out there every day. I don't think that City Hall, it's not falling down. Is it in excellent shape? No. But money's already been put into it. And while it may not be perfect, there's not a problem right now with City Hall. People are still coming in and working. It's ADA compliant, I believe. Am I correct?
Right now.
Okay, somewhat. So I would just ask you to think and focus on what are actual needs and not just what we would like, but what are the working conditions, especially for the police, because they're spread out. Why not get them all together instead of having a detective over here, evidence, take you over there with us and the marijuana smell, and then having the police here with the tiny room? Why not get them all together and build them a nice office that Martinsville can be proud of? That's my thought.
Good points.
If I could speak as well. To add to what she's saying, she's absolutely right. The police department has been promised for years and years and years that we were going to have a new police department. I understand we have to look at the big picture. I understand everybody has needs, but it is disheartening whenever police officers are told year after year, hey, you're gonna get a new police department. We're promising, we've got the blueprints. I can remember looking at the blueprints in Franz Hollander's office back in the early to mid 2000s. Hey, this is what the public safety building is gonna be. This is what we're gonna do for you guys. Listen, we appreciate everything that the council has done for us. You guys have helped us out immeasurably with salaries and with our equipment. We appreciate everything that you have done. But I really do think that a new police department needs to be a priority. Councilman Deckard, you mentioned a few moments ago about officers having computers in all their cars, and you're right, they do, but they still need to come to station to interview people. They still need to come to station to type probable cause affidavits. I know that the computers were after you had left, but sitting in your car and trying to type over to the side a lengthy PC, that's just not practical. Nor would I want any of our officers to be out there sitting in a parking lot somewhere while they're devoting all of their attention to that probable cause affidavit. They need to do that from the safety of the police department. So I would just ask that you do give consideration to moving forward with the new police department. I understand everybody has needs. I don't want the clerk treasurer's office to be in a building that's unsafe or uncomfortable for them, but we've been operating out of essentially closets for the entire time I've been a police officer here. It's unfortunately not been a priority, for years and years that we got a new building. And I think now is the time to move forward. Just some food for thought. I have a list of priorities, by the way, that we would like to see in a new police department whenever we move that direction. I'd be happy to email those to you, Councilman Deckard, and you can disperse that to the rest of the council, if you'd like.
Absolutely. And John, I know what we haven't said tonight too, and I know we discussed that as well, is temporary trailers are getting out from the parking lot there at the fire department, wherever to house you guys, well, that's being torn down as well. But again, I know when we bought Chrysler Square back in the Lusker administration, it was for that purpose of that. Then it was going to be turning that police department then, but things changed. They said, hey, let's get that front remodel for the clerk's office. Let's get them over there temporarily so we can redo this, get them back, and then we can do that. And that was that thought process back in that administration when it came through. I do understand that. I want to see that police department that you know, once, if we go tearing that down first, then we've got to house all those other departments and all those records and figure out what we're gonna spread them out throughout the city. You know, we're talking about for Bare Feet, I've heard over here at the Maxwell's, signage going out, I've heard there, I've heard other buildings. I don't wanna spread us out any more than what we are, and that's why I say, if we get on this project and get this, you know, we don't have to disrupt what's over there, and I don't wanna dump any more money into that, but I mean, we may have to do something.
One thing I think that you need to consider too is, and it's already been brought up here, but I don't know if anybody has actually nailed it down to say, hey, this is the hard numbers. I don't know how long we're talking about for renovating City Hall. For the planning, for all this, I think that I heard somebody mention a couple of years that it would take for City Hall to be renovated. We could conceivably have a new police department up within a year.
And I think that's what we're talking about, if we were remodeling this and adding it on, a freestanding building would get that done a lot quicker. Or we're getting I-69 intersection done here in 1 year, it's no open for Christmas. We can get a building, I'm sure we can get that up in that year's time, and then we can move over. That's why we're trying to discuss about what we need here at City Hall. If we put up that freestanding building, and we get the clerk's office and everyone else out of that office so that we can get then a view, and that was our priority, I think, all along, because we've got to get these utilities back here to City Hall where they belong, and give you guys that rightful space over there. As you recall, previous administration, they were trying to put you guys in the reporter's office, then they were trying to put you in just the building back here. That gives you a lot of room over there in the space that you need for satellite port or anything else for your storage, or well, we have to work with the city on their equipment, and that's what I say, I don't want to.
And the idea of us tearing down the public safety building and putting the police department up over there, that sounds great. All the officers would love having our own building. But I think you have to also consider just how long, if you're not wanting to run two projects at the same time, I think you have to think about how long it's gonna be. What I'm hearing is that we're talking about 3 more years before we could even hope to have the police department complete.
I think it'd be a long year if we are remodeling City Hall. That's why we're looking at that option of building that facility.
I
John,
understand.
that
I'm
would
just
be a
saying
year.
how long we're looking at before we would be in a.
Well, if you get that put up in a year, then we can start with you guys next. And again, we're doing 2 separate projects because that was
2 years instead
recommendation.
of 3.
A recommendation by our, Jeff Peters, that we start with 2 separate and not at the same time.
Right, but do you see what I'm saying? If we do that, then we would be talking 2 years instead of 3. That's still a pretty significant distance out before a new police department would happen. I mean, I understand we can't control what's happened in the past, but we can make good decisions about what we're gonna do now. And I think that a new police department in the near future, not as some abstract idea, 5 years down the road, I think.
No, I think this project, it ties us in and it holds our feet to the fire.
Obviously, it's the council's
We're doing,
decision.
right.
I want us to be informed.
I understand, and I appreciate it, John.
Good decisions.
Yes, absolutely, and we do too, and I appreciate that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think one of the things that Mr. Peters has pointed out, that yes, we have to do it in 2 different projects because of the dollar amount. But also, we're under some type of a time constraint, because if we don't have these going forward by the end of next year, then Becky, tell me if I'm wrong, but our tax rate would go down. Then once we did these projects, to try to get our tax rate back up, nobody's gonna be happy with that. So you wanna try to keep our tax rate as level as possible. So that's one of the things.
Taxpayers do not see an increase.
Yeah.
We're keeping it where it's at. So what's the next move?
I think what one of you guys said, some more information to digest in an executive session to kind of maybe try to refine how to go about this. I mean, on the one hand, before the end of next year, not to mention interest rates in the near future potentially, and not to mention police station is beyond overdue. I mean, I think if you think about the police station, it's kind of who we want to be. we just want to just get by, or do we want to be who we can be? And at the same time, we can't rush in, because I think these sort of projects are gonna have an impact on the city for 50 years. So, anyway, the executive session, we'll figure it out.
Mr. Mayor, we'll need to check with Gail as to see if this muster qualifies to, or musters to executive session. It may or may not meet that criteria. Workshop, yes, but as far as an executive session, that'll have to be cleared by Gail to see if we qualify for that under these discussions.
Well, we want to, at least open dialogue as a beginning. So, you know, these you kind of heard what we're concerned about, what our priorities